when is enough enough? Like, when are we there? When do we finally accept ourselves as enough? And that's the problem we run into when we live a life driven by expectations versus values and vision.
Top leaders, meaningful conversation, actionable advice, bulldoze complacency, ignite inspiration, create impact. Produced by the Southwestern family of companies. This is the Action Catalyst.
Christine Hassler is a life coach with a counseling emphasis, known for catalyzing radical self-reflection, but also while offering practical direction. She has really created this roadmap for life and for people of all ages, which is kind of about self-discovery, self-acceptance, self-forgiveness, and clarity. And she is a cum laude graduate of Northwestern University, and she also has her master's degree in spiritual psychology from the University of Santa Monica. Her book is called Expectation Hangover, Overcoming Disappointment in Work, Love, and Life. And it's really the guidebook for how to treat disappointment on the emotional, mental, behavioral, and spiritual levels. And so, Christine, it's great to meet you. Thank you for being on the show.
Oh, I'm equally as excited. Thanks for having me.
So can you clarify, like, what exactly is an expectation hangover, and how did you kind of come up with that term?
Yeah, we may love the phrase, but we don't like having them. I came up with it after having so many of my own. And basically, it's when it's disappointment, but how I break it down, it's when one of three things happen. Either the desired outcome or plan or result that you work so hard for doesn't happen. Things don't turn out the way you planned, or you get the goal, you have the result, but you don't have the feelings you thought you would have from it. Like, you get this great job and then you're like, wait, where's the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow? Where's the happiness? Or life just totally throws you an unexpected curveball. You lose a job, you get sick, someone dies, those kind of unexpected curveballs. So what I noticed about expectation hangovers is that they are similar to hangovers from alcohol, in the sense that your head is hurting. Maybe not physically, but all the thoughts and thinking and obsessing that happens when we have an expectation hangover. We just get really in our head. We lack motivation. There's a sense of regret. We're spinning and confusion. It's just a feeling we want to get over. And people really just want to get out of disappointment. And they'll do anything to basically not feel it. And what I noticed is that most people use coping mechanisms that involve depression and numbing. Anything from drugs and alcohol to overworking, really super being busy, looking for the next best thing. Even in kind of the personal growth community, there's something called a spiritual bypass, where people just try to jump to the silver lining or meditate their way out of it and don't really feel what's happening. And I'm really passionate about helping people leverage disappointment, because when we talk about disappointment and change, those things are the catalysts that create the most personal growth inside of us. Most people have their biggest leaps when it comes to growth when something kind of surprising or bad happens. That's usually what motivates us to do the work that really changes our life. And I've noticed that the most suffering people have is when their expectations don't meet their reality. But there's a real healing opportunity inside of that.
Do you tend to find that the disappointments that we have, are they based on expectations that usually come from the outside that people put on us, or are you talking more about expectations that we have, that we created for ourselves, and then things not living up to them?
It's absolutely both. We have the double whammy of expectations, all the societal things and checklists that we buy into in terms of our belief system, and then this incredible pressure we put on ourselves. I noticed that people, especially really intelligent, successful people, they motivate themselves by being hard on themselves and placing massive expectations. And the tricky kind of sneaky thing about that is it works. Like, I used to motivate myself by being very hard on myself, and I kind of didn't even realize it, and I'm not talking about being hard on yourself like you're a loser, you suck. Like, it doesn't have to be that severe. It's subtle, like, you could have done that better, or your friend's more successful, or why did you say that? Just these subtle things that are this critical voice inside of us. And it's effective. We get things done that way, but we have these massive expectations and standards that A, we may not live up to, and B, once we do live up to them, then we consistently keep raising the bar. And so when is enough enough? Like, when are we there? When do we finally accept ourselves as enough? And that's the problem we run into when we live a life driven by expectations versus values and vision, and really accepting and acknowledging ourselves for who we are and the unique impact we're here to make.
How do you balance that? Is there a middle ground that is kind of what we're seeking, or is it something different than that?
Yes, so both complacency and overdoing come from a place of sort of lack of self-love and insecurity and trying to compensate for something and not feeling enough in some way. We put these high driving standards on ourselves because on some level we don't feel like we are enough and we have something to prove. And on the opposite end of the coin, like when we get complacent and like we stop doing, then again, that's coming from a feeling of like not feeling enough or worthy enough of pursuing our own dreams. So at the root of this really is our relationship with ourselves and how we perceive the world and how we perceive ourselves in that world. So what it comes down to in terms of that middle point is really investigating, how do we define success? Like what's our definition of success? Is it externally based? Or do we have a definition that's more intrinsic? And the biggest thing from Expectation Hangover is that I've learned is that it reorientates people, myself included, from an outside in perspective to an inside out perspective. We start to realize that coming from our own values, our own what I call superpowers rather than expectation is not only a more balanced way to live, but it just feels a whole heck of a lot better. So it's more of a reorientation and a pivot in terms of how we perceive our life and how we take action than it is trying to balance between the two.
I love that.
We're so destination obsessed in our world and getting there. And it's like actually what we truly, enjoy the most if we allow ourselves and stop putting so much pressure on ourselves is the process and what we learn about ourselves and the qualities that come out of us while we do things. And the feel, because we think we're after form, but what we're really after is essence. We're chasing feeling more than we are outcome. But because we kind of don't know that, and because our society and even our educational system is so goal-based, we lose connection with that. How do you want to feel? Let's not worry about the form. The universe, God, whatever your spiritual belief system, it will take care of that. But if you really focus on the feeling of what you want to experience in life and get in energetic alignment with that feeling, then the form takes care of itself. I mean, it's people all ask me all the time, like how I've built my career. And it's truly been, the work I've done on myself and being really clear about my values and what I want to feel and looking at the things that have gotten in my way, limiting beliefs that don't work, ways I've tried to compensate. In the book, I talk a lot about compensatory strategies. And my biggest one was, as I mentioned, overachieving. And the reason why that developed is because I was teased and bullied a lot as a kid. I had this belief that I was unlikable in some way. Something was wrong with me. So my life was about proving myself. And that was great. As a straight A student, went to a great college, moved out to Hollywood because if you're insecure, you move out to Hollywood and have this really successful career at a young age, was making all this money. And it was like, when does the happy feeling come in? When does the confident feeling come in? And I had in a year, I had a lot of very severe things happen where I ended up on my knees, kind of just going like, what do I do? And had what I call a spiritual awakening. That wasn't it wasn't like this angel coming down, thing like that. It was just this internal realization of, wow, like all the things I'm looking for on the outside, could they possibly be inside of me? That was when I, had the pivot. So I think it's just like we get so sort of hypnotized by the way we've been conditioned. And to me, the process of awakening is really about looking at our programming. Because the great thing about our brain is it's totally malleable and we have the potential to change it. And to do that, we have to change our thoughts and we have to change our perception. And I love one of the definitions of a miracle is a change in perception. So even if you're in an expectation hangover right now, are you willing to bring a miracle mind to it by just changing how you look at it?
All right. So I want to go back to overcoming disappointment for a second. How do we overcome those disappointments when they do happen?
Yeah, absolutely. You're going to be disappointed because you are human. We all are human. And the thing about the human experience is we learn through contrast. That is totally how we learn. And I think that people try to avoid sort of the dark, the disappointment. And I'm all about leveraging it and milking it. I remember when I was going through my divorce, one of my coaches said to me, Christine, milk this for all it's worth. Don't just try to get over it. Like really go in because there's gold here. And that was really true and was so much of the work in terms of what became Expectation Hangover, because it wasn't just about healing from the disappointment of the divorce. It was everything that triggered inside of me. And that was one of the biggest growth opportunities of my life. And so the first thing, and to answer your question, is to move into acceptance of it. Rather than resisting it, rather than judging it, rather than trying to control it, rather than trying to change it, accept what is. I love a quote from Byron Katie. I might be paraphrasing a bit, but it goes basically something like, when you argue with reality, you only lose 100% of the time. So acceptance is not about, oh, I love it and I have to, have this positive attitude about it. I'm not about that. But just going into, all right, this isn't ideal, but I'm going to stop fighting. I'm going to accept it. And then after acceptance, you move into really letting yourself heal and feel on the emotional level. And I'm sort of kind of taking you on a little tour of the treatment plan in the book because this is the order that I go in. And what I've realized in my own life and working with thousands of people at this point is people don't like to feel. They like to feel good. We like to avoid the feelings of shame, of anger, of hurt. And it's important to feel that emotion is energy in motion. So when we suppress emotion, it's like trying to keep a beach ball underwater. You can keep it down for a while, but eventually it pops up. And it might pop up in the forms of irritability or a health concern or like not being able to access your intuition or whatever it may be. Like that suppressed emotion is not good for us mentally or physically. And so, I teach in the book how to release emotion rather than recycle it, because most of us don't know how to process our feelings. We tend to judge it, analyze it, want them to go away. And there's ways to release emotion where you find a place inside of you that's having the emotion, and you also find a place where you have compassion and you just allow yourself to feel without any judgment. There's actually a process in the book called the temper tantrum technique where I'm sure you've seen a child have a temper tantrum. And the thing is, children know how to feel. So if a kid gets upset, like you'll see they get upset, they start to cry, then they may be yelling, screaming, kicking, and then they kind of start to whimper and they kind of go into that, and then they start to slow down and then they may rock a little bit and they start to soothe themselves and then they want ice cream and then they're fine. They know how to ride the wave of emotions. And as young people, and our parents, did the best they could, but our emotions were kind of interrupted. We were told, shake it off, big boys don't cry, or we were like soothed with food or something like that. And then, later in life, we try to soothe our emotions by eating. So we found these kind of ways to suppress. And as adults, we have to look at, all right, how do I really release my emotion? And so, I basically teach you how to have an adult version of a temper tantrum so that you get the emotion up and out. And there's also other techniques, writing techniques and things like that. But the key is let yourself feel without judgment. And this isn't about identifying with your feelings. This isn't about sitting around and being a victim. Victim thinking gets us nowhere. When we're like, why did this happen to me? And my life is so hard. It's not about feeling sorry for ourselves. Sympathy and empathy are very different. Sympathy has pity on it. Empathy and compassion has love and forgiveness and understanding on it. So compassion, if we look at the word, I'm all into the meanings of words. So passion actually means suffering and means with. So it's really being with suffering. It's the difference. And we can do this with other people too. It's like how we, in my work with people, when I work with them on the emotional level, if they're experiencing an emotion, I don't console them. I don't try to fix them. I don't go in and offer them advice. I just hold this loving, compassionate space for them to feel with no judgment. And learning how to do that for ourselves is key to really overcoming disappointment.
What are some of the common emotional mistakes that you see people making over and over again?
Yeah. So one I briefly mentioned, which is the victim. I'm not going to get through that, and identifying with it. And it even can be subtle, but it's sort of like allowing the emotional level to get to that place of just kind of feeling sorry for yourself and losing hope and losing faith, because that's really paralyzing. And the other one, in terms of the other extreme too, is being strong. Like, I'm not going to feel, I'm fine. Like, I'm going to push my way through that. And what that does is it perpetuates what we talked about a little bit earlier in terms of that inner critic. Like, when we don't allow ourselves to feel, we're denying ourselves the truth of our experience. And again, in some ways, that's rewarded. Like, how many times have we heard, oh, you're so strong? And being strong is overrated. I'm a big fan of Brene Brown's work on vulnerability. Vulnerability is not weakness. It's authenticity. It's being real. It's like, this is really what's happening to me, and this is what I'm willing to learn from it. So that doesn't work. And then distractions, like distracting ourselves from it in the ways I mentioned earlier, in terms of I'm going to overwork or I'm going to watch too much TV. I'm just going to numb it out. I'm going to drink more, eat, whatever it may be. And then another thing is too, the kind of like spiritual bypass and pep talk thing. trying to get to whatever, I'm learning and I'm growing and it's all fine. And it's sort of like being strong with sort of like this positive attitude. And again, that gets rewarded as well. And the key to all this is just not allowing ourselves the authenticity of our experience and the truth to feel. And when I do retreat, I take people to beautiful destinations and help them overcome their disappointment. Because I'm like, well, if I can take them to like Costa Rica, maybe they'll be willing to deal with some things in a beautiful environment. And the biggest thing I see is just people, are scared. They're just scared to feel. And if we don't feel, and the emotional levels is the first part of the treatment plan. Next, we have mental, behavioral, and spiritually, but the emotional one is where I see the most resistance. And here's the thing, if we don't feel the anger, the shame, the guilt, whatever it is, we don't get to the other side of that. We don't feel all the juicy stuff. We don't feel the love, the joy, the creativity, the connection. Especially for women, underneath our anger is our fire and our passion and our zest. So many women suppress anger and they end up irritable and they end up kind of emasculating men and they end up just snippy. And that's not like who we are as women. We're warm and compassionate and loving and creative. But when we suppress this anger because we've been told that we aren't allowed to be angry and we don't really have healthy outlets for anger, we're missing out on tapping into our passion and our fire. And it's so important for us to tap into that.
Wow. Expectation Hangover is the title of the book. Christine, where do you want people to go to learn about you?
Well, you can go to christinehassler.com and you can get the book on Amazon or lots of ways to connect. I love connecting with people, so please reach out.
Awesome. Well, this was super insightful. Thank you for making some time here, and we wish you the best.
Oh, I thank you so much.
If you enjoy this podcast, please make sure to subscribe. And to stay updated on everything that the Action Catalyst is up to, make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Action Catalyst Podcast and on Twitter at Catalyst_Action. And as always, thanks for listening.